I have a little summer cold going on, so please excuse my voice. Today we're pleased to present the Merchant Acquisition Program, the MAP to Success. In this webinar, we're going to show you why a cultural fit between your bank and your provider is critical, how to ensure accountability throughout your merchant services program, particularly pertaining to merchant acquisition efforts, and why good segmenting precedes your plan. Before I introduce you to our in-house expert on data-driven merchant acquisition, I'd like to share with you just a couple quick housekeeping rules. We plan on doing about 30 minutes of insight and about 15 minutes of Q&A. Definitely won't go longer than 45 minutes. Please feel free to submit any questions you have throughout this presentation through our chat feature. If we don't get to your question at the end, we'll follow up with you via email to answer your question. The session will be recorded and shared with you via email by the end of the day. And now I'd like to introduce to you David Reed. I've had a chance to work side by side with David for many years. He's a Senior Vice President of Financial Management here at Security Card Services. David is particularly skilled at using data to drive merchant acquisition strategies, so I'm glad he's offered some of his time and wisdom today. Our hope is that you can take what you learned today and apply it to how your bank approaches its merchant services program or the potential of your merchant services program. David is our head of finance. You're probably asking, why would a head of finance be doing a call on merchant acquisition? And the reason's simple: data. As you look across a lot of industries across the country, they're all data-driven now for growth. Data is the key in many industries, and specifically we think it's the key to growing a community regional banks merchant services program. So without further ado, David, you want to start talking about the transition?
Yep, absolutely. Eric, I appreciate the introduction and a really good summary of what's to come. So with that said, I'm going to dive right in. First up is a cultural fit. Eric mentioned this. The key here is banks are different, and it's really important that your processor understand that merchant isn't always a one-size-fits-all product. Most of the processors out there are focused on quantity. They're transactional. Those guys want to process as many transactions as they can a second. Inversely from that, they generally do not invest a lot of resources into building relationships. When in our experience, we find that relationship, that is what produces the greatest results for the bank, and therefore the reason that a processor's culture must fit with the bank's culture. So some banks are sales-focused, other banks are operationally driven, and it is critical that the processor and bank understand one another. And in addition to that, the processor needs to be flexible enough to develop programs that can fit your bank's specific culture.
Hey, David, doesn't it take a degree of trust for a bank to have with their payments partner to work with the customers, to work with their business customers that they probably have 3 or 4 other business products wrapped up in?
Absolutely. These are the bank's customers, and as you just said, generally they do have 2, 3 other products tied up there. And generally, a banker spent a significant amount of time and effort acquiring those accounts. Due to that, there is often hesitation because they don't want to risk their existing relationship by referring this customer to a third party for an additional product. They really have to trust that their provider is going to provide that same level of service and professionalism that their customer currently receives from the bank. So next up is bank buy-in from the top to bottom. In short, this is important because it really helps drive accountability into the program, and accountability really is key to success. In general, your executives and C-level management, those are the guys that are going to make the decision on who the bank's going to partner with for these services.
Yeah, but David, chime in again here. Isn't it up to the bankers that really work in merchant services or card services to make those recommendations?
It absolutely is, and that really leads right into my next point. So the responsibility for the program typically falls on that management team, those people who are managing those day-to-day operations. And just to take that a step further, those are the guys that are typically recommending the program to the executives. And so it really creates even a higher level of responsibility because, those guys have taken that program to the executives and recommended it, so they really feel and they really are responsible for that program's success. So in addition to the C-level and the management, trust also has to be built within the various bank channels. So your treasury management, your loan officers, your commercial relationship managers, your product managers. It's really important that relationships and trust be built in those levels as well.
Why, David, why is that so important?
Those are typically the people that hold the keys to those relationships. That they've already built a level of trust with the customers, and that existing trust is a huge factor in generating a successful merchant acquisition program.
Got it. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I've already touched a little on accountability, and we're going to dive in a little bit further here. So an effective merchant services program has defined steps, defined responsibilities, and transparency to create accountability to their actions.
David, when you talk about transparency, are you talking about everybody in the bank being able to see what's going on with the program?
Yep, that's correct. So we'll discuss data in a little bit, but it's very time-consuming. It takes a lot of effort to compile the information and to build the program. And I can tell you the information will only take you so far without a solid action plan. So making sure you have a plan that fits your bank's culture, you have the right people involved, those people who hold those relationships, and you have the right vehicle to track and hold everybody accountable to the program is really crucial to a good program being successful. The merchant acquisition program is built on sound relationships, in-depth analysis, which we will talk about in a little while, and a tiered system of sales. So bucketing and strategically attacking the target market based off of different variables we'll discuss later.
David, you mentioned the word MAP. It's an interesting acronym. Didn't we fall into the MAP program from a bank that we currently have, a regional bank?
Yep, we actually did. So we partnered with that regional bank, and prior to partnering with us, they had around 2,000 merchants with their previous provider. Well, when the time came to prepare for the conversion over to our platform, the current provider had already locked them out of all the systems. So what we ended up with was no information to compile to successfully convert that base. So what we did was we scrubbed their ACH data, compiled similar analytics to what we're discussing here, and then asked each branch to provide statements for their top 20 merchants off of that compiled list. Well, we basically over the course of the following year recreated that process, and a year later, we boarded 1,800 merchants, less than half of which came from the original base, and effectively the MAP program was born.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. So I just talked a little bit about segmenting, but the process basically it targets merchants from the most highest volume, most profitable merchants down to the lower volume, least profitable merchants, and it does focus on all segments. So you should do your best not to leave out any merchant category, which we will discuss here shortly. Next up is segment first and make a plan. So you're always going to start with the data is our recommendation, and then from there you build the action plan around the results of the data analytics. Again, here talking about trust. Trust is key to this because this program relies on data, and it does take that level of trust and comfort in your partner to turn over the data necessary to compile the analytics to build this program. Processors are typically very bank vendor type relationships, and in order for these programs to be successful, you really need a true partner. As we talked about a couple of times already, the data is way more valuable when the right relationships are in place. This does require trust for the bank to share the data, as we just discussed. The processor also must understand all the compliance issues that come with being a financial institution. and sharing data.
David, that's interesting. When you've worked with some of our bank partners on this, what are some of the barriers that you've come into?
It's always data security, Eric. We work very closely with the bank's compliance department, and we make sure they're very comfortable with our data security policies. And in fact, there is another presentation in this series a little later this year that's going to specifically focus on compliance.
Great.
All right, so here we're going to actually start talking about some of the analytics. So we have the MAP program. It begins with a detailed analysis of the bank's ACH data. What we typically do is we ask the bank for 1 month's worth of all commercial ACH activity. We ask for that to include the ACH descriptors, banker's name, branches, and a whole array of data that will basically be the building block and the foundation for building the program moving forward. We take that data, we use various logic to parse and filter which transactions and volumes are credit card related. We then compile that by merchant, and we take statistics across our portfolio or your current portfolio in terms of revenue and apply them to each of the target markets that we have identified. From all that, once all that data is compiled, we then put together a target list of recommended merchants to call, and that list can be broken down by, banker. It can be broken down by branch. It all depends on how the bank's set up. Again, the bank's culture and the action plan moving forward. Eric likes to joke and says we're data junkies, and I think in any scenario, regardless of who it is, the more data you can provide, the better the end results are going to end up being. I've already spoken a little bit about breaking merchants down into tiers. You will see some generic volume tiers here. So typically, you'll classify merchants into 3 different tiers. We do micro merchants, which are the smaller merchants. Middle merchants, those merchants typically are what your portfolio averages. So that's kind of your normal sweet spot. And then your major merchants are your really large volume merchants. Again, you'll see 0 to 100, 100 to 2.5, and 2.5 plus per year. Those are generic volume tiers, and those are generally developed based off of your specific data and the results that the analytics return.
Hey, David, when these ACH scrubs are done, can't you get a pretty good idea on how much revenue is there from the ACH scrub based on the ACH descriptors and the vendor?
Absolutely. So the ACH descriptors do a couple of things. Generally, they allow us to give a concentration. Some concentration statistics around who those merchants are processing with. So able to break down the potential opportunities and show you how much volume is processing through First Data and what the estimated revenue is. How much volume is processing through TSYS, Global, Heartland, Transverse, all the various processors. And then in addition to that, we can get a very good idea of what they're paying by monitoring their debits. While I will say we are still in the process of nailing down some of the debit side. It can get tricky as sometimes sometimes the debits are from previous months. Sometimes the descriptors are slightly different. So while you can get a very good idea, we are still in the process of nailing that down.
Great, thank you.
So here we're going to dive a little bit deeper into each of the tiers. For major merchants, we actually send a team of experts out to visit the merchants. We internally here have a group of personnel that their sole focus is to sell major merchants. And their main job is to build relationships with the bankers who hold these large opportunities. And typically within a community bank, there's only a handful. And success of closing those major market opportunities almost always requires a shoulder-to-shoulder approach where the major market representative and the banker are attending these sales calls and attacking these opportunities side by side. For the middle merchant, it really depends on the bank. It depends on what type of program you're set up in. But we'll send anywhere from 1 to a team of people out to strategically attack those middle merchant opportunities which again are typically what we see as an average for your portfolio. And then for the micro merchant category, we have a call center that is used to generate leads. And from those leads, they can be handled a couple of ways. They can be sent to our merchant outreach team and sold internally, or they can be referred to bank personnel or in-market sales rep to try to close those deals. So here we're going to talk a little bit about some of the statistics we've seen coming out of some of these merchant acquisition programs. Bank customers will sign more often when they see the provider as an extension of the bank.
David, can you talk a little bit more about that here?
Absolutely. Basically, you're going to utilize the bank's brand. These are the bank's customers, and that loyalty in conjunction with the brand presence that the bank's already built, it creates a platform for a successful merchant acquisition program. So in our experience, a typical sales team selling merchant services is going to yield around a 40% close rate. What you'll see is if you can get a banker involved, so the banker that holds the relationship, if you can get them involved, they reach out to the merchant, they gather the statements, they're in contact with the merchant, you'll actually see a close rate of closer to 60%. You take that a step further, and the banker gathers the statements. They make the phone call to introduce the sales team, and they actually set the appointment up for the sales team. You'll see a close rate closer to 70%. And then last but not least, if the banker gathers the statements, they make the phone call, they introduce the sales team, and then they actually attend the sales meeting, you could see close rates as high as 85%. Again, it's going back to that shoulder-to-shoulder approach and the trust and loyalty and relationship that the bank already has with that customer. The point here is the more the bank's involved, specifically the banker with the relationship, the higher the close rate and the higher the success of the program. Reporting is one form of accountability. So reporting should really go out weekly, and it should really give enough detail to drive accountability.
Dave, what type of reports are you talking about here?
They're basically weekly reports, and they should, again, contain the detail to drive that accountability. So, for instance, it'll list all the branches and which opportunities are within each branches, and from there, maybe even where each of those opportunities is within the sales process. So it really gives you a weekly report to monitor what's going on, and not only hold the sales team accountable, but also hold the bank accountable to their side of the program.
Don't we typically send those reports to senior management so everybody knows what revenue is involved?
Absolutely. Again, going back to that top-down approach, all really helping to drive that accountability. So MAP's about defining responsibilities and reaching our goals. Again, without the reporting, without the accountability, it's really hard to reach those goals. And as you see here, ironically, the more bankers involved, the fewer calls that are needed to hit penetration goals. Reason being, you have a significantly higher close rate when the banker with that relationship is involved. Incentivizing. Incentives for the programs need to be appropriate, and they also need to be bank specific. Again, with all the different bank cultures, it's really hard to have a one-size-fit-all type incentive program. I will say that the best results we've seen to date has been when the bank actually adds merchant services to their current scorecard. So, the bank is adding merchant to their bankers, their branches, their managers' current incentive programs. It's back to the buy-in concept, buy-in from top to bottom, as well as accountability. The top end is holding all the lower pieces accountable to the program. Building a merchant program takes a systematic approach that builds trust. Done in the right way, it can be a powerful engine for new growth. To end, generating the data analytics, utilizing the bank brand and current relationships, and a partner that will take that shoulder-to-shoulder approach is really a great recipe for growing your merchant portfolio.
Great. Thanks, David.
Absolutely.
Got plenty of time here for some questions. I'm going to go ahead and start out. We have one from Molly out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Why is it important to have the banker involved? Is it because of the relationship between the banker and the merchant?
Absolutely. So the merchant already has a trusted relationship with their banker. That existing trust, along with the comfort of the bank's brand that they are already well aware of, just drastically increases the success of the program.
So it's all about the brand.
Yep, it's all about the brand that the bank has spent the time building, and in addition to the relationship that the specific bankers have spent the time culturing.
Yeah. Great. Next question, Stuart in Naperville, Illinois. What type of relationship manager incentives work best?
So we talked a little bit about these back in the presentation, and we do a ton of these. We do approval bonuses. We've done iPad giveaways. We do gift cards. We've even done trip giveaways where you give away a vacation. But again, I go back to what we found most successful is when the bank and the bank's management team is involved in adding merchant to the existing incentive programs. It drives the accountability, at the organizational level. So from the top down, accountability is being driven, and that's really worked well for us.
Next question is from Brent in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Do bank managers or branch managers need to be incentivized too? And how do you get the branches more involved?
Yep. Again, it goes back to the same answer as the last question. Making merchant part of that internal program, it drives the entire organization in the same direction. I mean, everyone's working towards the same goal, and that goal is growing the merchant portfolio.
Got it. Okay, another one here. Cheryl in Richmond, Virginia. How does an RM know when to refer a merchant that has in the past said no to processing payments with the bank?
That's always a good question. There's really not a definitive answer here. It really goes back to the different banks and what their bank's cultures are. I mean, the bank might be really sales-oriented. They might be really operationally oriented. We have partners that set reminders to, contact all the no's on a 6-month cycle. So every 6 months they're reaching out and contacting them. We have other partners who just never contact them at all. Their assumption is if they ever want to do business with them, they'll come. I will tell you that this is an ever-changing industry. It changes very often, and merchant-specific circumstances also change very often. So what we really like is that, just checking in on you approach. You stay in contact with the merchant. You let them know you do merchant services. You let them know, you're here to take care of them, which they already know due to the relationship they have via other products. That way, when the merchant ever does decide to make a move, naturally they're going to think of the bank and come that direction.
And kind of an extension of that answer, David, I would say that from what I've seen in the industry, when we do or an ACH scrub is done on a bank's business accounts, business DDAs, and there's a marketing program formed around those customers that are processing through somebody else, many times that we're finding that those customers didn't even realize the bank offered merchant services. And it goes back to that trust. They'd rather partner with their banker than someone that just walked in their front door. Absolutely. And just to expand on that a bit, we oftentimes see where they don't actually make a move up front. But the minute they have a service issue, the minute anything goes wrong, they're aware that their bank offers this product. And, again, naturally they pick up the phone and call the bank. That's a great point. Mm-hmm. Okay, one more question here. Brenda in New Orleans. How do these weekly reporting meetings look? And are they over a conference call? And then the last part of the question, are results tracked through a CRM system?
Yep, great question. So from us, yes, that report, it's actually available in real time. So at any point in time, if the management team wants to go pull that report, they go run the report, and it gives them up-to-date data based off of what's been entered, up to that second. Generally, we do weekly conference calls to review that report with senior management at the bank. With that said, you could do biweekly, you could do monthly, but to stay on top of the program and keep things, everyone accountable to the program, we generally like to see a weekly call. As far as how the report looks, ours actually list out opportunities by banker typically. So the banker that holds the relationship, it then shows how many opportunities they have. It'll show how much volume are within those opportunities, and then how much estimated revenue that volume generates. And it even takes it a step further. And it breaks it down into what cycle and the sales process are these opportunities in. So, Brenda may have 23 opportunities that are carrying $10 million in volume and $50,000 worth of revenue, and it'll break the number of opportunities, the volume, and the revenue down into the different stages of the sales cycle. So you might see that 17 have not been contacted at all. 3 of those 23 are in the proposal stage. 2 we've actually signed, and 1 we lost.
So just keeping track of everything, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thanks, David.
Again, going back to accountability and being able to understand, who in the process is doing what, and driving everybody towards that same end goal of growing the merchant portfolio.
Great, thank you. We're going to go ahead and finish up at 27 minutes. Thank you, everybody, for your time. That was the Merchant Acquisition webinar from David Reed, our Head of Financial Management. Everybody have a great day, and thanks again for attending. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.